In the house, delighted to have him, Captain Brian Niewind, North Dakota State Trooper, and we've got lots to talk about. Captain Niewind, welcome, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The main thing, and I want to get to in a minute, is this recommendation from the National Transportation Safety Board on cell phones. But while I have you here, and I was thinking about this as I was driving in today, and it was very slippery and it was a little scary, although I've had situations that have been more scary. We all have. You know what it's like here. But do you think that being a state trooper in North Dakota is about as tough as it gets because our weather is so tough?
I think every state in the United States has got different conditions. Ours can be pretty tough at certain times. We have quite the extreme in weather. Some day, in the summer it could be 100-some degrees out with 90% humidity and it's just unbearable out there. And then in the winter you could have 70 below wind chills while you're out there trying to work, and 18 inches of snow. So I think we have quite the extreme of weather that we have to work in. So when it comes to that, maybe we have some of the worst conditions to work in. Maybe Alaska state troopers are a little bit worse. But in this upper Midwest part of the United States, it can be pretty tough with the weather. When it comes to just dealing with people, I think we have good people in North Dakota. So we don't deal with maybe some of the bad apples that some of these larger states with larger populations deal with.
But still, I'm talking about, and I hate to use this term because they're protesters using this, I'm sure the 99% are great, but we have that 1% which forced us to pass some laws last session that ignore roads being closed, ignore barriers, and think that, okay, I'm going to keep going as if there's not a reason why this road is closed. And you must just pound yourself on the head and say, what are these people thinking? Do they have any idea the danger they're causing? And the troubles they're causing you? I bet those people must drive you crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty difficult because anytime those people drive around those road closed barriers and they get stuck out in the middle of nowhere, we're the ones that have to go rescue them. And the equipment that we use are patrol cars or patrol SUVs, and a lot of times we can't get out there without the help of the DOT and their plow operators. So really, you're putting more than one life at risk to go try and rescue whoever's out there. So it becomes very dangerous. There's times where we might have to be traveling in the wrong direction lane of traffic to try and get to somebody because we know those lanes are better than the ones that we would actually have to travel. So it becomes very dangerous when those roads are closed and people decide to disregard the warnings that have been put out there. So it's real important for people when roads are closed to stay wherever they're at. Don't try and take some back road to get someplace because obviously if the interstates are closed, which is the main highways through North Dakota, the secondary roads are going to even be in worse condition.
I always try to tell my son, who is young and thinks nothing can ever happen to him, that speed limits are for ideal driving conditions. Good visibility, good weather, but that just because sometimes you're driving the speed limit, that may be going way too fast. How are drivers around here? I was very pleased when I came in this morning and I was driving 40 on I-94, and I found that most everybody else was smart enough to do that too because they know if they went faster, you were going to have an accident. Are most people pretty good about recognizing that when it's slippery out there or the visibility's poor, you got to slow down?
I think most people are. Sometimes it takes maybe a storm or two, or like a rain event, like we had today, a little water on the roadway where it freezes, for them to realize again that they need to slow down. But if you talk about the Red River Bridge, we have 65 to 69,000 cars that cross the Red River Bridge every day, and like in an icy condition like today, we only had 2 crashes in all of Fargo-Moorhead today. So with that amount of traffic coming through our area and only having that many crashes on our interstate system, we did pretty good today.
Last year, I know it was around the holidays. I'm trying to remember if it was, I think it was a little after Christmas, around New Year's, but not too far from Fargo, a few miles out of town, there were hundreds of cars stranded on I-94. I'm guessing you might have even worked that situation. Did you work that situation? Or
I actually was out of state during that time. I kind of lucked out, I guess, during that storm.
All right, but you know what I'm talking about. All right, how does that happen? Where you have so many cars stuck in the middle of a storm, how do we avoid having those cars out there? Have we learned anything from that so that this won't happen again? Or where do we go from here to prevent this from happening again?
Every storm that we deal with in the wintertime is a little bit different, and some of them hit a little bit slower, some of them hit a little bit faster, and that storm hit very fast across the whole state of North Dakota. And Between the DOT and us, we usually make the decision when we're going to be closing a roadway, and we usually close them when the conditions don't warrant them. They're not passable anymore. And that day, the conditions were where the roads were still passable, but the visibility was very poor. And we came into a situation where we had a crash, and it just kind of kept piling up because there was still traffic on the roadway. And that we got in the situation where we had 100-some vehicles out there before we could actually get the road closed and get traffic off, and so we didn't have 200 cars piled up out there.
What is the biggest problem you see on the roads? Is it drunk driving? Is it speeding?
He is still
it,
down at Maine.
Lack of wearing seatbelts? Is it something else I'm not bringing up? What's the biggest problem that you see out there?
I think the most common violation that we find on the roadways is people that are speeding. That's the most common violation why we stop people, whether we write a citation or a warning. When we talk about crash causation factors, I think the biggest reasons we have a lot of crashes are people are drinking and driving. We have a lot of right-of-way violations where people either stop at a stop sign and then don't yield to traffic, or they're not stopping at all. People driving left of center, they're crossing over the center line. And that could be because they're falling asleep. They could be drinking and driving, whatever it might be. And then speeding. It could be they're speeding, they're going over the speed limit, or they're just driving too fast for conditions. And then it's not really a crash causation factor, but people aren't wearing their seatbelts. And if you talk about our fatality picture, 70% of our fatality crashes involve somebody not wearing a seatbelt.
And I want to talk about that. All right, just before we go to weather, just between us, when it comes to speeding, do you give people like an extra 5 miles an hour or so before you pull them over? In other words, if it says 75, does that really mean 80? Or how does that work?
I'd say the speed limit is the speed limit. That's the maximum you can go. You can drive slower than that. I don't think people realize that. You can drive slower than the speed limit. The speed limit is the maximum you're supposed to go. Obviously, speedometers kind of vary a little bit. You might think you're going 75, you might be going 78. So there is a little fudge factor that we give people. Sometimes it's not equitable for us to go out there and stop people at 78 miles an hour. Some days it might be. Traffic some days might warrant that we only stop people that are traveling 82, 83 miles per hour or faster, just because there's so many people speeding out there every day. And some days it might be where we're stopping people at 78, 79 miles an hour.
Okay, so your message is don't push it too much.
Don't push it.
Okay.